Ok, legal, tá bom, normal.
Não ter potência para fazer uma ultrapassagem segura não é legal. Mude para um Carville H6, o híbrido que conquistou o Brasil. E tem até 393 cavalos de potência e 77,7 quilos de torque. Carville H6, a linha SUV eletrificada mais completa do país. GWM, Hello Tomorrow. Paz no trânsito começa por você.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. As Democrats sift through the wreckage left behind by Donald Trump's victory, it's now beyond question that the party needs a major rebuilding effort with working-class voters. A new analysis from the New York Times finds that the problem has been numerous cycles in the making. From 2012 to 2024, Republicans enjoyed a 13-point swing among working-class whites and a 37-point swing among working-class non-whites. Those are some pretty sobering numbers. And today we're fortunate to be talking to James Carville about what went wrong and where Democrats go next. Thanks for coming back on, James.
Well, thank you, Greg. Delighted to be here.
So clearly just about every group moved away from Democrats in this election, though there are indications that in the states that Kamala Harris's campaign contested with Senate races, the shift was less pronounced. The movements among working class voters in particular is alarming stuff. What's your immediate reaction to all of it?
Well, I mean, I'd say at some level, disappointment. At another level, almost, it was predictable. You could see it. And I also think that the problem is particularly acute among males. And I've thought that for a long time. And also, I think much of the problem is cultural. And I think that the Democrats' almost gleeful embrace of what I call coastal culture, kind of a almost ill-defined thing, but I think we all understand what it is. It just was more alienating to people than we could imagine, and particularly alienating to people in the middle of the country.
Well, I want to come back to that in a bit. A big shift among young and non-white voters. They backed Trump in numbers that would have been hard to imagine only a few years ago. Harris only won voters aged 18 to 29 by 54 to 43%. Harris only beat Trump among Latinos by maybe 5 points or 10 points, depending on the estimate. I got to think with young voters and to some degree Latino voters, part of the problem here was communication. And I want to ask you about that. What are you thinking right now about what the party needs to do to improve its ability to reach these voters? You mentioned that a lot of this is cultural and a lot of this has to do with males. Young males are a problem for the Democratic Party. But again, a lot of that's communication. What are you thinking right now about all this?
Well, first of all, with young voters, part of it is communication, but part of it is real. All right. So when a person, an older person, say me, okay, who is a net saver, right, who owns a house, doesn't have a mortgage, doesn't have to pay insurance, has money in the stock market, this is a great economy, all right? But if I tell somebody 26 how great it is, just, man, what are you talking about? There's no chance that I can buy a house with these interest rates. Every time I look, the tuition somewhere is $70,000 a year. Or whatever. Every time I even think about buying insurance on everything, I'm totally screwed. And it's almost the more that you talk about it, the worse it gets. These people don't think the economy for them is very good. You can understand how it is. Rents are going through the roof. And almost when you talk about it, it drives them further away. As opposed to that you could do any number of policies that are universally popular, that young people would embrace, that wouldn't drive a whole lot of people away. But we didn't do that. And we thought if we just talked about women's reproductive health, that we talked about what an odious character Trump was, that would completely turn him off. Well, it turned some off, but not near enough.
I do want to point out, though, that Kamala Harris had a real agenda for costs, right?
For what?
What's that?
Who knew about the agenda?
Well, that's the thing. What I wanted to ask you about is this, right? So Harris had a real agenda on costs. Trump did not have a real agenda on costs. Clearly, Trump's appeal to young men in particular was really about cultural stuff. He got a level of penetration into the information space of those voters that I think Harris did not. And this is not someone who campaigns on policies or on addressing costs in any significant way. He said inflation's, been a disaster under Biden and I'll fix it. But that's not actually a real agenda. So you've said, I think, that part of the problem here is informational. I'm not at all dismissing the fact that, right, it's very real for young people. But the question is, how do you communicate with young people about the problems that they're facing? And you have some thoughts on that, right?
I do, but let me just preface it by a couple of more things. If you ask people, this one we really kind of know, but people will say crime is up. It's decidedly down, and like not by just a teeny bit, not marginally. It's down. Okay. Suppose I were to ask a group of your friends who are educated, informative, when you think about military recruitment, what do you think it is? It's off, about average, or better than average? Huge numbers of people are going to say it's off. It's actually exceeding its target. Okay, that's a fact. Now, it's a fact that no one knows. So the other thing you tell people, one of the reasons we have high gas prices, actually really don't now, but let's shove that argument aside, is there's too many environmental restrictions on domestic energy production. In the Saturday Wall Street Journal, there was a story that said that all companies, the energy companies, were rejecting increased production. They already had too much. We're actually flooding in oil, and they're scared the price is going to get too low. But no one is deciding on those facts.
Right. Trump actually campaigned on drill, baby, drill, tried to portray the Biden agenda as a disaster on energy production. Of course, that's bullshit.
Side does not want to drill more. In fact, they want to drill less.
So what do we do?
We don't know that. Huh?
What do we do about this?
Okay. So it got me to thinking. We don't know how people get their information. I don't. I'm 80. To me, the whole world is the Times, the Post, the Nets, cable TV. It dawned on me we don't do anything. So what I'm trying to do, Greg, is to get people interested and get the right people to do an exhaustive, detailed, well-fielded, well-constructed survey on media consumption. I cannot tell you, I just talked to a pretty active political consultant that did focus groups with black voters in Milwaukee. They're on TikTok. I don't even know what TikTok is. Actually, the movie gave me a TikTok account. They have no idea what it is.
James, TikTok is the sound that a clock makes.
I know. Yeah, it's about all I know. I used to go to my grandchild. I go, tick-tock, tick-tock.
Right. It's also it's a bedtime story, too, TikTok.
Right. But so we don't know. And all of the things that we think we know, we don't know. So we have to start asking ourselves, where do these people get their information? What do they trust? What do they not trust? And I've been calling around and really want to do this. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about this because I want to stoke interest in this. And, sometimes you have an idea and you call 10 people. And 5 say, that's a good idea, James. 3 say, that's okay. 2 say, it's bullshit. I've called 10 people and 10 people said, you're damn right we need to do this.
Well, James, let me ask you this. So you want to do a very deep dive, I imagine, not just polling, but a very deep and comprehensive dive into how people are getting their information now, including these groups that Democrats have lost. This is something you think has to be a major agenda item for the party going forward, right?
I do. It's beyond. It's just, and it's also how do we retain the voters that we have. I mean, we've lost a bunch. Somebody sent me the demographic readout, and it was pretty much across the board. Now, this is the thinking you lapse into. Well, James, it wasn't a landslide. We only lost by a point and a half. True. But we won by 4.5 the last time. Well, 6-point turnaround in American politics is sea level. It's like losing a football game 35-10. You're not close. So I think when this is done, I feel confident that eventually it's going to be done. I think we're all going to be surprised. Now, it's a hard survey to field. You got to, there's so many different news sources that people have. You can't do the standard pick from one. The New York Times, the such and such, the such and such. That's not going to work. And my guess is that when the books are written about this election, the Trump people had a better understanding of who they were talking to, how they were talking to, and again, what medium do you talk to people through?
I want to ask you a little more about that, if I can.
We're way behind on that.
Yeah,
it's a gut. I can't prove it, but it's a gut feeling in the mind.
I think there's no question that the Democratic Party is far behind on this particular thing. Are you talking to major Democratic donors about this? You trying to raise some real money to put behind this?
Well, I will. As I get and I'm trying to get the right people to field the poll and then go to them and try to say, I'll help you. I mean, I'll do Zoom calls. Try to get people behind this. Maybe there's going to be, if there's a new DNC chair, which has traditionally been a giant waste of time. I'm sorry, it just has. To say maybe, you could get behind this. I don't know. But I'm talking to a lot of different people, and the feedback I get is universally positive. And but we got to get a proposal and a pitch to say, hey, these are the people we're going to get to do this. This is how we're going to conduct this survey. This is what we hope to find out. And I think if we do that, because I know a lot of Democratic donors, and they're like, man, what happened? The Harris campaign spent $1.5 billion. Future Forward they were admitting to spending $900 million. I've never heard of that kind of money in politics.
Are you hearing from any Democratic donors about it? Are they saying, are they positive about it? And I imagine you're envisioning something more than just a poll, right? Like a major overhaul, a look at how the Democratic Party communicates with voters and how to change that going forward in a big way.
I'm pretty limited to the media consumption survey. I'm pretty limited right now to how people get their news, which I don't know. And I'm always said, I'm never always a what you communicate guy, not how you communicate. And always let somebody else figure out how we communicate. Well, no one has done that. So I got to start asking the question myself. Y'all tell me, did we do radio? Did we do TV? Did we do flyers? Did we do mail? Did we do direct contact? Did we do computer? That's all passe. I've been just living. I know this. In my opinion, everybody else is living in the dark. So when you live in the dark, what do? You try to turn the goddamn light on. Turn on the flashlight. Let's see where because we just stumbling around, hitting walls, tripping over furniture, and let's see how we get there. And I don't know anybody that really knows this.
Well, let me ask you, James, do you think this should be key for the next DNC chair? I think it should be part of the debate among the candidates for DNC chair. They should say what their strategy is to accomplish what you're talking about.
I've had 2 people running for DNC chair that have indicated that they want to talk to me, and I'm not going to tell you the names but I'm going to say this is what you should do. Now, I don't know if the average DNC member, I think they can grasp this, but we got to stop everything and figure out how we're going to talk to people before we proceed any further. And I have not begun to talk to major donors yet, but I will. But I gotta, before I go to them, I got to say, look, this is what it's going to cost. This is how we're going to do it. This is who we think should do it. And this is what, but I can't guarantee you what it's going to say.
Right.
But you might give me $250,000 and it comes back and says something inconclusive. I have to accept that that's a possibility, but we just don't know how to do it yet. And because of people like you, that other people read, and you throw this idea out, and the people that know a lot more than you and I do start having ideas, and they'll respond to it. Or people will call me and say, do this or do that. But I'm trying to find the light switch here, dude, and I can't. The wall is blank right now, but we are fooling around in the dark here. That I know.
Well, it's clear that the Trump campaign really knew how to communicate with young men in a way that I think we don't really understand.
Well, so let's go back. I'll give you an example. In March of this year, I knew we had a problem with men. All right. And I have too many posters, too many campaigns, and shit, we just bleeding men. So I do an interview with Marine Dowd, and I'm trying to draw attention to the problem. And I said, I think we have too many preachy females in Democratic campaign coach. Well, you had a predictable freaking reaction. Okay. You know what? No one has criticized me since the election for saying that. People who say, well, you kind of had a point, James.
I want to ask you about that, right? So you've been
trying to draw attention to the problem.
Right.
And the way you draw attention to the problem is you draw heat. And I drew heat, and I was glad to do it.
Do you like the Daily Blast but want even more analysis of the biggest headlines from around the world? Do you want an ad-free listening experience so there's nothing between you and expert commentary every day? Then consider becoming a member of the DSR Network, where you will also gain access to exclusive content across all of the DSR Network podcasts. Listeners of the Daily Blast can get 40% off of a monthly or annual membership using code BLAST at the dsrnetwork.com/buy. That's code BLAST at the dsrnetwork.com/buy. Now please enjoy the show.
So you've been on the forefront of saying the Democratic Party is kind of getting trapped into being woke by these advocacy groups and stuff, that Democrats need to moderate their positions or at least not speak in faculty language or whatever. I want to read to you what Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman had to say about Republican attacks on Representative-elect Sarah McBride, who's transgender. Fetterman said this, quote, "There's no job I'm afraid to lose if it requires me to degrade anyone. If that's a defining issue for a voter, there will be a different candidate. We have a bathroom in my office that anybody's welcome to use, including McBride." So there you have James Fetterman clearly saying Democrats should forcefully defend the dignity of people like that, marginalized people. That sounds like a message that can win in a swing state. No? What do you think?
So what happened was, if you go to the airport in Amsterdam, which I've been to, they have stalls. They don't even have, there's no men's room. I'm fine with that. You know how many bathrooms the United States government has? But 1 million? I don't care. Okay? I really don't. Now, what happened is at least Harris at some point was for transitioning surgery for prisoners. Well, the simple answer to that is we don't do elective surgery on prisoners. Okay? You can't get if you're in a penitentiary, you can't get your nose fixed. All right? You can't have breast augmentation or something like that. So that's a simple enough answer. I don't disagree with what Senator Fetterman said. I really don't. But I think that it goes much deeper than that. That's an easy thing to kind of dismiss. When you were talking about changing the way that people spoke to each other, the language that they were using, how they were indicating things, the distorted view of history, the faculty lounge relished using language that other people didn't use that made them feel superior. And it was totally rejected. All right, defund the police. You think people remember that? That's sticky. And of course, I saw what Alicia Slotkin said. I'm trying to get on my podcast. He's on vacation. if we need to quit using the language of the faculty lounge. Whoever said faculty lounge before? Let me think. We start using the language of the assembly line for
Okay.
great.
But so let me ask you, is Fetterman using the language of the assembly line floor when he says what he said?
I'm not, Fetterman is not a very big fan of me. I don't really care much about him, but I think he's right on this.
Right, Jake, you know what I'm saying, right? Like,
Yes,
so
right. But the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, they passed a bill, the Utah on trans people in high school sports. The guy's a Mormon, Republican. All right. He said there are 100,000 high school athletes, 6 of them are trans. Somebody else figure this out. That's why you have an athletic association. That's why you have an Olympic committee. But this is not the civil rights issue of our time. Look, but from what I do know, particularly these young children, they have terrible emotional problems. They have suicide rates of 6 times. I don't know the exact number, but somebody can figure it out. And I would just say, if I were a candidate, I don't want to cause any more grief for anybody. And this is a problem for the State Athletic Association to figure out compared to the NCAA has figured it out. The Olympic Committee has figured it out. That's not my problem. That's a problem people deal with.
Here's the thing, right? So you brought up Alyssa Slotkin. I think she said, as you pointed out, something like identity politics has to go the way of the dodo, right?
Correct.
But so that sort of strikes me as a little too easy, right? Like the complication is, do we defend people like Sarah McBride or not? And Fetterman said, yes, we do. Does that mean identity politics isn't going the way of the dodo? That's what I'm trying to figure out, right? So do we defend these people or not?
Sarah McBride defends herself very eloquently. She says, I really don't care. I'm trying to raise income for people in Delaware. Okay, let's just follow her. And she says, this is not a huge issue to her.
Right.
Okay? Or whatever, right? Why should it be the lead issue to us? All right? She is saying that. I have great admiration for her response to this. I actually think it's very smart. She said, no, that's not the issue here. And of course, you can always make a headline by weighing in on this. But this is a problem it's a real problem if you're part of this community, but it's not very many people. And how much of this election was centered around this topic? All right, how many ads did they run on this?
A lot.
So what people say is, well, okay. So Jon Stewart says, all right, these people say that this wokeism hurt us. Actually, no Democrat ran on it. Jon Stewart is correct, but you know who did run on it? The Republicans.
Right, and that's why you need a response.
The other side gets to play.
But so that's why you need a response, right? So the question is, do Democrats engage this the way Fetterman did?
We spent half this interview talking about Trump.
All right.
Okay. All right. Somebody, that's for people who are faced with this to do it in the most humane way that we can possibly do it. And we're going to be sure that everybody has a bathroom that they feel comfortable going to. That's it. End of it.
I mean, that sounds like defending. It sounds like, I understand what you're saying. You're saying don't get drawn into their frame.
All we do is talk about it. We're talking about this like it's the number one issue in American politics.
No, you're absolutely right. Let's move on.
Correct.
So,
thank you.
So Biden's administration, most pro-worker in decades, arguably, right?
Easily.
Right? Biden marched on a picket line, made it easier to unionize, took on corporate concentration, expanded minimum wage and overtime protections, cracked down on labor violations, and his policies have unleashed a huge amount of investments in rebuilding the industrial base, including lots of advanced manufacturing jobs for people without college degrees and left behind areas. I don't have an answer to this. Why didn't any of that make a dent with working class voters?
Okay, all right. All of this demonstrates true. By the way, the auto workers got a raise like we never saw before. All right, the screenwriters, the Hollywood writers got huge raises. Everybody was given, because you had competition to workforce, post pandemic. So we're for raising minimum wage. We didn't run on it. All right, why not say America needs a raise? We're going to give them $15 an hour. Boom. We didn't say it. Why didn't we say the most consistently popular thing in polling is raising taxes on incomes above, say, $400,000, $500,000 a year? Pick a number. We didn't run on this. One of the reasons that I read that the Harris people didn't want to accentuate the minimum wage because they thought it was anti-business. Oh, bullshit. Okay? I mean, my God. And so if somebody's running for president in 2028 as a Democrat, I would get a committee of billionaires that says, don't tax you, don't tax the man behind the tree, tax me. If we would have said we're going to raise taxes on all incomes above $400,000, made it central to our campaign, take that money, which is actually a lot of money over 10 years, it's a lot, and put that into a first-time home buyers mortgage relief fund, then we would have spoken to somebody, Greg.
Yeah,
We
no,
would have
absolutely.
spoken to them.
A couple of things about that. 100%, right? I absolutely agree that if the party is going to improve the working class voters, a big part of it is to be even more economically populist. I mean, I think
Yes.
Biden actually moved in an anti-neoliberal direction and all that, right? Pretty populist policies, generally pro-worker, but more. I agree, more of it, right? But it feels to me like the problem runs a little deeper than whether to run on this policy or on that policy. It seems like what's missing is a belief among working class voters that Democrats are focused on their material plight, right? So how do you fix that?
By focusing on their material fight, by telling them you're going to raise the minimum wage, by telling them that you're going to have a transfer of wealth to privilege older people and help younger people. So I was on a GI Bill. You know what the GI Bill did?
You mean talk about it more? Talk about it.
When I went to law school, I got $300 a month, tax free, just to spend what I wanted on it. I bought a house. I was locked in at the lowest possible mortgage rate that you could get, and I didn't have to pay a down payment. I mean, first of all, half the battle is telling people you see them and you see their plight. And we didn't sufficiently do that. And again, we also have our original thing. We have a lot of misinformation. Military recruitments are actually exceeding targets. Energy is we're producing so much domestic energy, even the people in the energy business don't want to produce anymore. They like to produce less. Crime has dropped historical levels. So as opposed to telling people crime's low, go around the country doing events with police people saying, you're doing a great job, you need more support to continue the work that you're doing. I mean, there's ways that you can do this and get your point across and not get trapped in it. But I go back to our central point, Greg. We don't know what medium to tell people this and how to get the information to them. We do know there's a lot of bad information out there. That for sure.
Right. Yeah, I think a big part of the problem is the communication channels, right? Including with working class voters. I mean, that to me, to go back to your original point, I think the reason, again, allowing that the Biden administration and the Democratic agenda can be more populist and should be more populist economically, left populism, good, right? It should be more. There should be more. But allowing for that, the problem isn't just policy, it's also communication.
Well, to me, the problem is we don't even know how people receive the information. So until we find out how they're getting the information, and we can work on the information that we provide to people, but we're not sure how they get it. We kind of know that they're not reading the New Republic or the New York Times. They're not.
Don't remind me, James.
Okay, I know. I mean, be it or James Carville's YouTube channel. Right, or anything like that. I understand that, but if we actually find out how to reach them, then we could be more effective in what we reach them with.
And the next step will be raise some money
Right,
from Democrat donors.
Get right, and figure out who are the best people to conduct this. I've already put up, I don't want to give anybody's name right now, but I've talked to a couple people, mostly on the academic level, that I think do pretty good polling to see how would you design this? How would we do this? How would we reach these people? I think we can reach them by telephone like we used to online.
A real deep dive.
A real deep dive. And I think when we come out of that, when we come up out of the deep dive and we resurface, I think we're going to have some gold nuggets here. All right. So I think it's possible we could actually find something out that we don't currently know. At least that's the hope.
Well, I'm 100% for it.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler on the DSR Network.